What is up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, programmers of all ages? Welcome back to Introduction to HaxeFlixel game programming tutorial series. So, first off, I have to apologize. I am coming down from the flu currently, so if you hear me coughing, sounding weird, it's just residual slime still making its way out of my system. I apologize. There isn't much I can do about it, unfortunately. Second apology for this video. Last week I made a bit of a mistake with our assets. Now, when you, in the Ogmo level editor, they want your first sprite to always be a void sprite, so no pixels. And I did not know that until I did the prep for this week's tutorial and my world came out black where it didn't render the walls. So I found out the hard way that you need to have a void sprite as your first sprite in your sprite sheet thingy. So I did fix it. If you go into this week's files, link in the description, don't worry about it. If you go over to assets, images, walls and flooring, let me just open that in a new window. You will see that, okay, you can't actually see that sucks. In any case, I updated the file so that the sprite has the blank sprite, the first one. I also updated the files for the data, which includes the introduction to HaxeFlixel.ogmo file as well as the meleemap.json file. Just download these files, put them in your assets data and your assets/images, and then you should be ready to rock and roll. I'll see you in the editor just now. BRB. Okay, now that you have the files in your editor, you can see if I open images, walls and flooring and zoom in a bit, you can see there is this void 16 by 16 and then you have the walls and then you have the floor. And please note that you also do need the Ogmo file. If we open it, it's a JSON file that describes how we set up our project. And I also checked, it figures out that it's one directory above and then inside images where our sprite sheet is. So that should be all good and well. Awesome. Okay, so now that we have everything in our assets file, the first thing we need to go do is open project.xml, scroll down till you see the libraries and then add-ons. So we can just control / to add that, and just to make sure that we have it installed, we can say haxlib install, what is it called? Let me just zoom down a bit. Flixel add-ons, just to make sure that it is installed in our HaxeFlixel haxlib thingy. So you can say it's installed, we're running 2.10.1. Cool. Can close that out. And it's uncommented, so now we have access to the add-ons. Now if we go over to melee test state, we can add a few new class variables. So that was weird. var_map of type FLX Ogmo reloader. It is rebuilding the cache, so just give it 1 sec. Let me retry. Why does it not wanna? Okay. I get it. Let me just remove that line. F1. Restart language server. Let's see if that works. Okay, cool, that worked. Now let's retry adding another class variable called _map of type FLX Ogmo reloader. Awesome. Now we have that. So next is private var underscore walls of type FLX tile map. Whoops. Okay, private var max monsters. We can set that to 2000. Private var amount of monsters of type int. So this is the max amount of monsters that we allow to be in our map at any given time. And this is the amount of monsters currently on our map at this point in time. Next we say private var monster pos, an array of position, which we haven't created yet, so it's going to scream at us the moment I save. Yeah, so when we loaded, we created the map, we had that thing where it was like a line of positions where the monsters could spawn. Now we want to get that information into an array so that we can, if we respawn a new monster, we can just randomly select one of the positions inside the array of positions and spawn a monster at that spawn point. Now to make our lives a bit easier, we can create a new class called position singular .hx. So class position, and this is pretty much just a data class that would serve. You can think of this class, if you know C programming, almost like a struct for us. And yes, I'm aware that Hax does have a struct, I just don't like it, so I prefer using a class-based approach, which is fair. So, but you could probably go either way. So we have an X position of type float. We have a Y position of type float. Public function new, a constructor that takes a X and a Y position, both of type float, if I can type for the life of me. So we say this dot underscore X equals X, and this dot underscore Y equals Y. Then we just have to construct two getters for this class. It returns a type of float. Return underscore X. And then we could just copy this for the Y position. So get Y and Y. Random typo mistake. Okay, cool. Now, one thing to note is, depending on what programming languages you know, you might have seen that arrays tend to not be dynamic in size. So, like say for instance, we think of the Rust programming language where we have arrays which are fixed in size as far as I remember, and then we have vectors which are like arrays but they have a dynamic size that can change. And it's not like that in this programming language. Lists have a static size, if I remember correctly, and arrays have a dynamic size, which is pretty cool but a bit weird to get used to. So we can just create an empty array and then we'll later fill it with the positions when we load the map. So var and then player respawn position of type position. Awesome. Now if we scroll down a bit, just after we set the world bounds, which we'll leave like that for now, We say map equals new FLX ogmo3 loader. It wants the project data, which we can say is asset paths dot intro. Then wants the ogmo file for that one, and then it also wants the JSON file, asset paths dot melee map.json. Cool. And then we say walls equals map dot load tile map, and we say asset paths dot walls and floor PNG, and we call it walls, or we specifically point to the tile layer called walls. Next we say walls dot follow, so that the camera never goes outside the walls. And we say walls dot set tile properties. So the first tile is the empty one, so it's the 0th tile. Then the first tile is our walls, and we want collision detection, so we say object dot any, and then finally walls dot set tile properties for the floor tiles, and FLX object dot none, if I can spell none. And then we add the walls to our scene. Cool. Next up is the player, where we say map dot load entities with a function callback called place player, and we specifically say we want to place the player which comes from when we set up the tile thingies, the tile map, I mean, sorry. Now we need to create this function, so right underneath our update function we can say private function place player. It takes an entity of type entity data. Then we say if entity dot name equals player, then player respawn position equals a new position at entity dot x and entity dot y, and then we set the player set player dot set position, so we just move the player onto that position dot x and entity dot y. Awesome. We go back up to our create method right over here, so we can delete this part because we no longer need that. Then we say map dot load entities get monster locations, and the name of the entity layer, which we set as melee monster, is spelled exactly like that. And then just before we go create the function, we just want to say amount of monsters is currently 0. Now if we save, we'll get an error, so scroll down. Just below the place player function, private function get monster locations entity if entity dot name equals melee monster. Then we just say monster pos dot push. So add a new position onto the end. Position of at entity dot x and entity dot y. Now this function will get called for each spawn location on the map, so don't worry about us not setting up recursion. It's handled on the other by the framework. Okay, up to the update function. So just above, ooh crap. So just above the shoot function, we want to start spawning in the monsters so that we actually have monsters on our scene. So just create that function and then scroll down to just underneath get monster location. You say private function get monster locations. Nah, my bad. So just underneath the get monster locations function, we want to say private function spawn monsters. So if amount of monsters equals less than max monsters, so we create a variable for the zombie position of type position, just so that we could be more specific and see if we end up screwing up with our getting the position from the array. So we can say, so from the monster position array, we want to get one of the random positions, so we use the random function between 0, because arrays start at 0, and the length of the array minus 1, so that we don't have an array out of bounds error when we try to spawn it. When we say melee monsters dot add new melee monster at zombie pos dot get x and zombie pos dot get y. We want to target the player and we want it to be of type zombie. Awesome. Now we do the same for the skeleton. I'll just copy this line to save typing it out, since I can't apparently focus today. So we can just change this to skeleton position, and then also just copy this line for the sake of not messing up. We say skeleton position dot get x, skeleton position dot get y, and it's going to be of type skeleton. Now lastly, we just want to increase the amount of monsters by 2, and that should handle spawning in the monsters per frame. So every frame, well, every time the update function gets called and our monsters are still underneath the amount, it will just add another pair to our scene. Awesome. And that should be all. Let's... Why am I getting... Did I forget to save? Max monsters? What do I call it? Up top, yeah. Oh, max monsters. Plural, not singular. Okay. So if we type line test HL. Actually, I want to show you this. I figured out where my dumbass mistake was. So if you click down here on hashlink debug, We don't want it to be hash link, we want it to be lime, I think. Why don't I see lime now? We just delete this. We go into here, run and debug. Oh, then we say lime specifically. So that way, every time we press F5, we get debugging. I think it's going to work this time. Yep. It runs lime build HL dash debug dash dash connect 6000. That way we have access to the debugging features of the editor. Cool. So whilst that's building, never mind, it should be done. So if we go over to debug console, is the game gonna pop up? Yep, here it is. Cool. So if we say test, melee map, and here you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We forgot to add collision detection. That sucks. Like I said, I'm still coming down from the flu, so be gentle. So here in the update function, we want to say flxg.collide player, and so we collide the player with the walls, and we also want to collide the melee monsters with the walls, and just above those two we say flxg.collide. We want to collide the projectiles with the walls, and we want to have a function callback called handle projectiles walls collisions. So let me just save that. It's going to throw an error. Way at the bottom. So we say private function handle projectiles walls collisions. It's going to take a projectile of type projectile and a wall of type FLX map. And we just want to say projectile dot kill. Awesome. Now if we press F5 again, let's see if we get collision detection this time. I'll be back when the build is finished. Okay, build has completed. So if we go on test, melee map, now we have wall collision, and you can see that the camera doesn't go beyond the walls, which is awesome. And we can shoot fireballs, they collide with the walls. See if we can find any skeletons or zombies roaming around. They should have my position and thus be moving towards me as they spawn, I would hope. I'm just moving slowly because the skeletons tend to blend with the background. Ah, here we go. We can still shoot at them and they'll slowly start coming. And you can see it's not the best pathfinding algorithm ever, but they sort of, even just by mistake, do still manage to get to us as long as we give them a lot of openings to move through, which I actually like. And as you can see, they do quickly start hoarding up to us, and you can quickly start getting overwhelmed by it. In any case, just going to close that before my player gets destroyed. Thank you for watching this week's tutorial. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to drop a like, subscribe, and maybe tell your friends about this series so that they can learn game development as well. I hope you have an awesome week. Until next time, goodbye.